I wanted to take a few minutes and go over some of the topics that will be on your final exam. On Blackboard, I have posted a PowerPoint that has topics for you to look at that are on the final exam. I have posted a blank copy. I've also posted a copy where I've worked it all out, and then I'm also going to record this video talking about some of the topics. The first one is domain and range. To find domain, you look side to side on the graph. This graph goes on forever from left to right, so the domain is negative infinity to positive infinity, which is all real numbers. To get the range, you look for your lower boundary, which this one goes on forever. Higher boundary is -1. So range is negative infinity to -1. Or it might be written as y less than or equal to -1. On number 2, it takes one person 4 hours to do a job, so they could do a fourth of the job in an hour. It takes another person 3 hours to do the job, so they could do a third of it in an hour. Together, I do not know how long it will take them, so they could do an xth of it together in an hour. Find a common denominator, which is 12x, and I'm going to multiply each fraction by 12x. I'm not going to physically multiply by the 12x because the whole purpose is to divide out your denominators. So 4 divides into 12 and leaves 3. Then I multiply what's left. 3 times x times 1 is 3x. 3 divides into 12 and leaves 4. Multiply what's left. 4 times 1 times x. And then x divides out x. 12 times 1 is 12. Combine like terms and then solve for x. If you want to see the rest of this worked out, you can look at the review that I posted on Blackboard to finish it. Now, this second one, or number 3, really you should have set notation here. I first need to find out where 1 belongs. Is 1 less than 7 or is 1 greater than 7? Well, 1 is less than 7. So I need to take 1, substitute it in for x, and I would end up with 5. And that would be my answer. Number 4, distribute, combine like terms, and then put the answer in interval notation. You can look at this one on the PowerPoint that I posted. Now here, what I want to do is I want to take 3, I want to substitute it in f, I want to take 3, substitute it in g, work out each one of those each one of those expressions, and then find the product. So 3 minus 4 would be -1, 3 plus 4 would be 7, and then -1 times 7 would end up to be -7. You would follow that same process whether I was doing f plus g of 3, f minus g of 3, f times g of 3, or f divided by g of 3. I would take the 3, substitute it in each expression, and then perform the operation. This little 0 or circle means to do composition. So I'm going to first take 4, substitute it in g. So I would take -8 times 4 squared, 5 times 4 plus 2, and I end up with -46. Then I'm going to take this -146 and I'm going to substitute it in f. And I end up with a final product of -1166. Now, I overemphasized this 0 or O. Typically, it's a smaller O, which stands for of. Do not get that confused with multiplication. On number 7, what I would do is, on my calculator, go to y equals, put in -2x plus 3, hit graph. Then hit second graph and get 3 points. I chose 0, 3, 1, 1, and 2, -1. Plot those points. And then that is the line for f of x. Now, to get the inverse, since the inverse is a reflection on the line y equals x, you just turn your coordinates around. The x-coordinate becomes the y-coordinate, the y-coordinate becomes the x-coordinate. So I get 3, 0, 1, 1 stays 1, 1, and then negative 1, 2. That is the inverse, and that works for any function. Find 2 or 3 points, take those points, turn them around, and that will give you the inverse. Number 8 is a division problem with complex numbers. So what you want to do is look at your denominator, and you want to find what's called the conjugate, which all that means is take that middle sign and change it to its opposite. So I'm going to multiply numerator and denominator by 2 minus I. Now you can work that out using algebra, or you can use your calculator. To get I, you hit second and then decimal point, and the final product is posted on the notes. Number 9, I wanted to take a few minutes and solve this. Typically you would factor. This does not factor, so I'm going to do the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is on your formula sheet that you may use when you take your final exam. A is 1, which is the coefficient of x squared. B is negative 4, the coefficient of x, and then C is 12. So I'm going to substitute these values. When I take negative 4, it turns positive. When you square negative 4, you need to put the negative 4 in parentheses. A is 1, C is 12 over 2 times 1. Now take your calculator, type in what's underneath the square root, and you would end up with negative 32, and then 2 times 1 is 2. To take care of the negative underneath the radical, you would put an I. Then I need to look at 32 and simplify it. Well, my perfect squares are 2 squared, 3 squared, 4 squared, 5 squared. Now 6 squared would go above 32. I need to look at this list from the bottom up and find the largest perfect square that will divide evenly into 32, and that would be 16. So I'd break that down into 16 times 2, take the square root of 16. Now look at the 4, and the 2. You do not include this 2. There's a common factor of 2, so I'm going to divide everything by 2. So I end up with 2 plus or minus 2i square root of 2. For number 10, on the formula sheet, you have something that says, a formula that says vertex. It has negative b over 2a, and then it has f of negative b over 2a. What this means to do is to get your x-coordinate, take negative b divided by 2a. So I would have negative 12 over 2 times 4. So I end up with negative 12 over 8, which reduces to negative 3 halves. Take negative 3 halves, substitute it in place of x. And then just take all of this, put it in your calculator, and you end up with negative 14. So the vertex is negative 3 halves, negative 14. Now for number 11, the key word here is ground. Anytime that you want to find when something will hit the ground, you would take that equation, set it equal to 0, because on the ground you're at a height of 0. Move that 16 over, divide by 16. To solve for t, I would square root both sides, and I end up with plus or minus. If you type that in your calculator, you end up with 4.3. Since time cannot be negative, your answer is just 4.3 seconds.